I wish someone showed me this years ago. I used to build rating systems that worked, but felt dead. Click a star, nothing special happens, move on. Then I learned this trick. Suddenly the stars draw themselves, pulse with energy, and celebrate the moment you click. No JavaScript, no libraries, just SVG and pure CSS doing something that feels alive. This is the kind of small detail that makes users smile without knowing why. In this video, I'll show you exactly how to build this animated star rating from scratch and why this tiny interaction changes everything. So let's start creating it, bro. But before starting, please like the video to motivate me to create new tutorial videos like this. So let's start. We are starting with the HTML structure for a star rating component. So sit back, relax, and let us walk through this together. We begin with the body element. This is where all visible content on the page will live. Inside the body, we add a div element. This div has a class called rating, and this container will hold everything related to our star rating system. Inside the rating div, we start adding our inputs. Each input is a radio button. Radio buttons are useful here because they allow only one selection at a time. Every input has a type set to radio, a unique ID, the same name value, so they behave as a group, and a value that represents a star choice. Right after each input, we place a label. The label is connected to its input using the for attribute. This means when we click the label, the corresponding radio input is selected. This is important because we are not going to click the radio buttons directly. We will interact with the stars instead. Inside each label, we place an SVG element. This SVG is what visually represents the star. The SVG includes a view box so it scales properly, and inside it we have a path element. That path draws the star shape itself. The path data defines the points of the star, and the path length is set so it can be animated later with CSS. This same pattern repeats for each star. An input first, then a label, then an SVG with a path inside. We do this 5 times to create a 5-star rating system. Each star has its own unique ID, but they all share the same radio group name, so only one star can be selected at a time. At this point, we have finished the HTML structure. We now have a body, a rating container, 5 radio inputs, 5 labels, and 5 SVG stars ready to be styled and animated with CSS. Now that the HTML is in place, we move into the CSS and start from the very top, going in order and not skipping anything. We begin by selecting the body element. First, we set the height to 100 viewport height. This ensures the body takes up the full height of the browser window. Next, we set display to flex. This allows us to easily center content using Flexbox. We then use Justify Content Center to horizontally center everything and Align Items Center to vertically center everything. Finally, we set the background color to a very dark gray value using a hex color of 0E0E0E. At this point, the entire page is dark and the content will sit directly in the center. Next, we target the rating class. We set display to flex so all child elements line up in a row. We then set flex direction to row reverse. This flips the order of the stars visually, which is important for the hover and checked effects later. After that, we add a gap of 0.3 rem to give a little spacing between each star. Then we define 2 CSS custom properties. The first one is stroke, set to white. The second one is fill, set to a yellow color using a hex value of FFC73A. These variables will be reused throughout the rest of the CSS. After that, we target the input elements inside the rating container. Here, we set appearance to unset. This removes the default browser styling for radio buttons, making them invisible, so only the custom stars are visible and clickable. Then we target the label elements inside rating. We set cursor to pointer. This tells the user visually that these stars are interactive when they hover over them. Next, we move on to the SVG elements inside rating. We set the width to 2 rem and the height to 2 rem, so each star has a consistent size. We set overflow to visible, so animations that go outside the normal bounds are still shown. We set fill to transparent, so the star starts empty. We set stroke to the stroke variable we defined earlier. We set stroke line join to bevel to give the star edges a sharp look. We set stroke dash array to 12, which creates a dashed stroke effect. We apply an animation called idle that lasts 4 seconds, runs linearly, and loops infinitely. Finally, we add a transition, so changes to stroke take 0.2 seconds, and changes to fill take 0.5 seconds. This brings us to the first animation definition, which we will continue with next. Let us continue right where we left off and keep moving down the CSS in order. Next, we define the keyframes for the idle animation. Inside this animation, we start with the from state. In this state, we set stroke dash offset to 24. This causes the dashed stroke around the star to appear as if it is slowly moving. Because this animation is set to loop infinitely, the stroke keeps animating while the star is idle. After that, we target the SVG element when its parent parent label is hovered. The selector is rating label hover SVG. Here we change the stroke color to the fill variable. This means when we hover over a star, its outline changes from white to the yellow fill color, giving immediate visual feedback. Next, we target a more complex selector. We select an input that is checked, followed by any sibling label, and then the SVG inside that label. When a radio input is checked, this rule applies to all labels that come after it due to the general sibling selector. Inside this rule, we start by setting transition to 0 seconds. This removes any transition delay, so the animation happens immediately. We then apply 2 animations. The first is idle, which still runs for 4 seconds linearly and infinitely. The second animation is called yippee, which runs for 0.75 seconds and plays backwards from its starting state. Next, we set fill to the fill variable, making the star solid. We also set stroke to the fill variable, so the outline matches the fill. Then we set stroke opacity to 0, which hides the stroke. We set stroke dash array to 0, so the dashed effect is removed. We set stroke line join to miter to sharpen the edges. Finally, we set stroke width to 8 pixels, giving the star a bold final appearance. Next up, we move into the second animation definition, which we will break down step by step next. Now we move into the yippee keyframes animation, and we go through it carefully from the top without skipping any properties or values. We begin with the 0% keyframe. At this starting point, we set transform to scale 1, so the star begins at its normal size. We set fill to the fill variable, but we also set fill opacity to 0, which means the star is not yet filled visually. We then set stroke opacity to 1, making sure the outline is fully visible. The stroke color is set to the stroke variable. We apply stroke dash array with a value of 10 to bring back the dashed outline. We set stroke width to 1 pixel, making the outline thin again. Finally, we set stroke line join to bevel, so the edges return to a sharp angled look. Next, we move to the 30% keyframe. Here we set transform to scale 0. This causes the star to shrink down completely. We keep fill set to the fill variable, but fill opacity remains 0, so the fill is still hidden. Stroke opacity stays at 1, keeping the outline visible. The stroke color remains the stroke variable. Stroke dash array is still 10. Stroke width remains 1 pixel, and stroke line join stays bevel. This creates a collapsing effect while maintaining the outlined appearance. Then we move slightly forward to 30.1%. At this exact moment, we change the stroke color to the fill variable. We set stroke dash array to 0, removing the dashed effect. We change stroke line join to miter for sharper corners. We also increase stroke width to 8 pixels. This is the snapping point where the star transitions from an outline into a bold, filled shape. We are almost finished with the animation, and we will wrap it up in the final section next. We are now finishing up the last portion of the CSS, and this completes the entire source code in order. We move to the 60% keyframe inside the yippee animation. At this point, we set transform to scale 1.2. This causes the star to slightly grow larger than its normal size, giving it a popping effect. We also set fill to the fill variable, making sure the star is fully filled with the yellow color. This final keyframe completes the celebratory animation when a star is selected. There are no additional keyframes defined after this, and this closes out the yippee animation. With that, all animations used in the rating system are now fully defined. At this point, the CSS file is complete. We have styled the body to center everything on the page, built a flexible rating layout, removed default radio input styling, made the stars interactive, and added idle and selection animations using keyframes. And with that, everybody, we have finished walking through both the HTML and the CSS source code, step by step, exactly in the order it was written. And finally, the project is complete and everything looks just fine and completely functional. Now, if you liked the video, please consider liking it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for new contents. See you in the next one. Have a sweet day. Bye.